If you could go back in time, you could either vote for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. Who would you rather vote for?
Trump.
Okay, why do you support Trump?
Um, Number one's probably the immigration policy. I'll acknowledge he's a little strict at times with the way he's trying to deport people, but for the most part, I think he had to stop the bleeding at the border. So that's one thing I support. Um, I, I I like the tariff to a certain degree. I think wise people have learned that he goes to the extreme at first and then he backs off of it. That's just his negotiating style. So, and I don't want to sound like what some people say, but you gotta read through that. The guy's an entertainer. The guy's a real estate developer. The guy's he's a spectacle. He likes to do things in a spectacular fashion. So the end game isn't always where he starts. So
Okay, so could you be specific with like what you'd like in terms of his immigration policy?
I like the concept of a merit-based future, right? If we're going to change things, let's at least uh, make it somewhat merit-based. If I'm not mistaken, most countries, if you tried to move there, you do have to have some level of proof that you can support yourself and that you bring something of value to their country. You can't just immigrate to a country to um, mooch off their resources.
Okay, I don't think that's what's happening. In terms of immigration, immigrants are actually have a higher labor force participation rate. So this idea that they're just like quote unquote mooching off the system is obviously ridiculous. Now, if you want to talk about being merit based, do you think that the person you voted for has a lot of merit, Trump?
Merit for what? I mean, he's obviously been a successful businessman. He's, well, I guess I don't follow where you're going on. Does he have merit?
Yeah,
Um,
does he have merit?
he's proven himself as a successful businessman. He's proven himself as a successful politician. Um, what else is there? I mean, everybody has merit, some form or
No, but
another.
like
But
for being president, like none of this is necessarily for being president. Just being elected doesn't mean that you're like you have merit. That's kind of ridiculous.
well,
Now, if you want to talk about being a successful businessman, I mean, he had six different bankruptcies. Do you know any good business people that have six bankruptcies?
I will guarantee that most successful business people probably had a bankrupt business
Uh,
at some time in their
Maybe
path.
one, but six.
Well, depends on how many different businesses you try. I mean,
I mean, I couldn't like I've
people.
been asking people this question for like years at this point, and I've never had a single person been mentioned that had six bankruptcies
Uh,
outside of Trump.
Anybody entrepreneurial and aggressive will have had bankruptcies. I mean,
Six of them, though.
he's yeah. I mean, my brother had three businesses, and two out of the three went bankrupt. The third
That's
one was
not six, though.
successful. No, but if he had
Dude, that's two
300 attempts,
bankruptcies.
he would have.
Trump had three times the bankruptcies that your brother has.
Yeah, but
Three
he probably
times.
had 20 times the attempts. When your
Well, I mean, when you
entrepreneurial
inherit
drive.
when you inherit $400 million from your dad, it's definitely a lot easier. Now, again, what are all these other people specifically that are super rich that have six bankruptcies? You know, I'd love to see. Like,
I mean, have there ever been companies bought by Berkshire Hathaway that filed bankruptcy?
we're
Maybe.
talking
I
about
don't. I don't
six
know.
times, not one bankruptcy, six
Yeah, but
times.
it doesn't matter how many times you went
It
bankrupt. It's how
does.
many
It
times have you
actually really
attempted?
does.
How many times you've attempted?
Okay. How about
Plus,
this? How about this? You think he's a fantastic businessman? What policy, economic policy, has he influenced to get passed that is demonstrating of his successful business mentality?
I, I think lowering taxes on businesses will promote business. I think uh, the tax policies that make USA businesses more competitive
Why are we bailing out
is a good thing.
Argentina?
Uh, I don't know much about that topic.
Didn't they do that? Didn't they like lower taxes a lot? Didn't they like try that model? Well, so why are we bailing them out if it works
No,
so well?
I I don't know the history of Argentina.
Okay. Now, if you want to talk about lowering taxes and things like that in terms of Donald Trump, lowering taxes on businesses, right, through the context of the trickle down, has actually just led to wages not increasing with productivity when prior they did, which means wages would be higher right now if it was the case that we didn't impose trickle down economic policy because it would have continued on the same trend in terms of productivity increase. Right, so I think because it doesn't really there's not much of an incentive to pass down the money to your employee unless you profit from it because there's a fiduciary responsibility on
But you,
behalf of the shareholders.
yeah, but your premise is that businesses should be passing down their profits to their employees. Businesses should be paying employees for the value they bring to the table.
Yeah, which is
Um,
productivity based, right? So as
yeah, and
productivity
most
increases, we would see increases in wages reflective of productivity, which has stopped happening since the 80s. What's happened in the 80s? Well, stagflation, right? Not or not stagflation was the 70s. I apologize. I
well,
meant I meant to I meant
you,
to say trickle
you're
down policy. That's not what I didn't mean to say
but
stagflation.
you're
Stagflation was the
assuming the
70s.
productivity increases are because of wages. There's many things that are
Yes, yes.
increasing
Typically,
productivity that
we saw an increase of wages reflective with productivity prior to trickle down economics policy being implemented.
yeah, but productivity now is more driven by technology than the staffing and wages and employees.
Okay, so then where are the profits going then? If
Profits
it's
go to
and
the owner
also
of the
it
business.
was technology based anyway. Like for example, in the industrial revolution, like do you think that that was not technological based?
Well,
At least
throughout history, there's always
at least how
been
we view
technology enhancements.
technology, right? That's how we view technology, right? It allowed
Well,
for an increase in the level of yield, right? Which specifically allowed for us to produce more things.
yeah, I mean, technology today, we're not talking computer chips and stuff like that. Technology is any form of invented mechanism or process that enables you to be more productive.
Yeah,
So
so
yeah,
essentially the point
throughout
is that
history,
productivity increases should lead to an increase in wages reflective of that productivity increase.
no, wages
Yes.
wages should increase because the employee is bringing something of value to the table.
That's productivity, dude.
Not if the productivity enhancement was created because of
But
technology enhancements
they're
or
the one
business.
using the technology because they're the worker.
Yeah, but if a business borrows $10 million and puts in all this machinery, then it enables its employees to be more productive. Why should the employee get the profits from that? The employee is only more productive because the business owner invested in the equipment that allows them to be productive. The employee didn't create the productivity. The employee utilized the investments paid for by the
Yeah,
owner of the
and the
business.
employee and the owner of the business did not create the productivity either. That was in response to a profit mechanism that existed in the economy because of the consumer. So I don't understand why you're specifically saying that. The employer benefits based upon the employee. You know that, right? The employer wouldn't be able to benefit to that degree because they wouldn't be able to be that productive if it wasn't for the employee. So acting like the employee
Yeah,
does
but
not deserve an increase based upon the level of productivity increase, which is what they specifically yield to, is definitely ridiculous.
it's not ridiculous.
It is.
Every employee, if you're not being paid what you feel you're worth, go find somebody else to pay you what you feel you'll be worth. It
Yeah, but if there's no other options in the context of an economy, then you would realize that it doesn't happen to that degree. And also, the point that we're
well
making
then
here is that, again, employers, right, they have the ability to increase wages reflective of productivity, but choose not to because of the fact that they can keep that money for themselves.
right. Well, and what's wrong with that? They're the ones that made the investment to in
What's
an
wrong with that?
attempt
Because
to be profitable.
I want wages to increase reflective of productivity. I think that was good.
Well, if wages increase, if businesses have to pay their employees more, don't they just raise prices? Isn't that detrimental to the poor when goods and services go up in price? Just like tariffs. You know, if you guys are so confident that tariffs are a tax that the consumer pays for, then why do liberals want to tax businesses more? Doesn't that just make a more of a burden on consumers?
No, it
You,
doesn't.
you,
It's not
you
reflective on consumers to the same degree because it's placed on profits and not the cost of production.
uh, any any tax, whether it's a tariff or an income tax or a payroll tax that's paid by the employer, not the employee, it goes into the cost of production. So you guys say it's okay to tax corporations more from an income perspective, but you're so against taxing the Chinese producer that's trying to sell the products. It's
You don't
a
know what a
tax is a
tariff is.
tax.
You think a tariff is paid by the foreign country?
No, no, I think
That's
a
what you just
tariff
said.
is paid by one of three people. If if the foreign country, it's paid either by the foreign country or the importer or the consumer.
No,
It's
it's
not
paid
it,
by the American importing business.
but when an importing business calls a foreign country and says, I can no longer buy your good because of this tariff, that guy says, well, I'll drop my price a little bit. And then there's a balancing act where everybody's got to pay a chunk of it. It's even the automakers. They said
It's
they're not
again,
raising their prices
it
because of
inevitably
tariffs.
speaking,
They're
if you want to talk about where ends up being paid by, is inevitably mostly paid by the consumer.
uh, it may be mostly paid by the consumer, but it is partly paid by the producer, partly paid by the
You're saying if there's
importer.
some sort of negotiation within that respect, which they could also go to other people in the context of the market because of the fact that the tariff has caused this. So it's a very small portion of people that what you're saying is going to be applicable to, and it's also not taking into account plenty of other factors in the market that are obviously relevant. If you're talking about who it's directly paid by, it's obviously directly paid by the American businesses importing the product. But you're saying that like there might be a deal that tries to that like a company around the world might try to cut. Sure, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they paid it.
Well, if you're talking about who writes the check
It's the
to
American business importing the product.
it is the importer. But what if that importer was importing $10 million of goods and he says, you know what? Price it at 9 million and I'll still buy it. But at 10 million, I can't afford the tariff. And then the Chinese guy says, all right, I'll drop my price to 9 million. And that enables the guy
Yeah,
to pay
that's
a,
assuming that there's no other person, particularly in another country, that could pay them more than 9 million,
right, right.
right? So
But
then, like,
no, I agree. Let's go back to the tax. Tariff is a tax, right? That's what you believe. That's what I'll grant you, that a tariff is a tax.
okay,
Income tax are also a tax. So why do your party likes to talk about the idea of raising taxes on corporate? They don't pay their fair share. Well,
raising income tax, yeah,
it's okay to raise the income tax, but it's not okay to raise the tariff tax.
yeah, because tariffs will have a regressive negative impact, whereas income tax is a progressive tax, meaning people who are rich pay disproportionately more.
It's a corporation paying the tax. That's what I'm talking about. Not personal income taxes, corporate taxes.
If you're talking about corporate
When
taxes, which corporate taxes are it's only for specifically like 28%, which is not even reflective of what we specifically see in terms of income tax. The main one is income tax over 400,000. But why
again, you
corporations corporate tax again in this idea is still going to be reflective of profits.
but is it common for Democrats to want to raise taxes on corporations? Yes,
Yes,
I
and
think we
that's
can
for
agree.
higher income corporations. Yes, progressive tax structure.
Uh,
We have a progressive tax structure for corporate tax, for income tax, for the different types of things that we
no, the
advocate for.
corporate tax is a flat federal tax,
Now it's flat
28%,
because of Trump. It's 21% because of Trump. It was specifically,
21. Yeah.
it was a progressive tax structure under Obama. For income earners under $50,000 in terms of corporate income, that specifically was paid at a higher tax rate, specifically under the Trump administration compared to the Obama administration by 6%. It was 15 under Obama, and it's 21 now under Trump.
But if a if a corporation has to pay a tariff, you argue that they raise their prices on consumers to cover that, right? If a corporation has to pay a tax, why don't you have this
One, because it's specifically those that are
that goes
just
through
high.
to the end product to the consumer?
One, it's progressive, meaning it impacts people who are higher income to a greater extent. Two, profits, right? Like you understand that one's based on the cost of production and the other one's based on profits.
Well, I think where we're missing each other is you're, you're what I commonly hear is just a generic, the corporate tax rate needs to go back to 35% or 28 or whatever. Nobody says, let's go back to a progressive corporate tax. They all just want a higher corporate tax,
Progressive corporate tax is what we've
which,
had, and that's what I advocate for. Just saying that other people haven't said that specifically to you is not a
okay,
response to my argument.
okay. I'm learning today that you mean a progressive corporate tax when you support higher taxes on corporations.
Yeah.
So that's a different discussion.
Okay. I mean, that's what everyone's been advocating for. We don't want to tax small businesses that much. We want to tax the highest income businesses that much.
Well, I guess a business is a business, right? Unless you're going to go in the details of LLCs and pass-throughs and all that. But the corporate tax, where a C corporation pays currently 21%, it, it, it's a totally different discussion to talk about going to a progressive C corp tax than it is to say just raise it from 21 to 28 or 35 or whatever.
I'm
But
confused what your point is
regardless,
here.
well, my point is, any corporation who has the burden of higher taxes will pass that on to whatever product they're selling to the consumer.
Yeah, it's about the proportion that would be. The proportion that would be specifically through the tariffs that we're talking about is significantly higher. So again, when you have a
So,
progressive tax structure, that mitigates that effect.
so if a corporation pays $10 million more in a tariff, that affects the consumer more than a corporation paying $10 million more in an income tax?
If you have a progressive
It,
tax
it,
structure in terms of corporate taxes, that actually creates better conditions for competition within the context of the market, right? And it helps out small businesses if you're specifically taxing larger corporations to a greater extent. There's a mechanism for competition that exists within the context of the country that would be beneficial that we'd specifically point to in that connotation that doesn't exist in terms of the tariffs. The tariff
so
specifically imposed on countries around the world actually gives, right, the ability for large corporations in the United States to take even more profit share with less competition. This creates conditions for better competition.
are there any prominent politicians that are advocating for a um, progressive corporate tax?
That's exactly what we were advocating for across the board. That's what established already. That's what existed under the Obama administration. I've already explained this to you.
No, every all I hear is the
Dude, I don't
Democrats
know
talk.
who the hell you're talking about, to be honest with you. No clue. This is something that's very common.
When I listen to senators or the news commentators that are arguing for higher corporate taxes, they're always talking about increasing it from a current 21% corporate tax to a higher rate. They never talk about a tiered progressive
Okay,
step.
then
Um,
they need to specify that more, maybe.
okay,
But that's
yes.
that's been the
Uh,
position of the Democratic Party.